The Poco C75 is a smartphone with a lot of screen for, well, not a lot of money. And as I began to review this device more, it begged the question, is bigger truly better? If you're looking at the design of this phone and think it looks familiar, then you'd be right. It's basically a Xiaomi A4. All of these sort of lower end budget devices come from the same manufacturers, just under different product names. So in our case here, we've got the Poco Price and that lovely colorway. The model I have here is the 4G version. It comes with a Heliotech G81 processor, as well as 6GB of RAM and 128GB of storage. There is an option to upgrade this to 8GB of RAM and 256GB of storage, but right now here in the UK you can only purchase the 4G version. There is a 5G version in other markets like India, for example. For these sorts of internals, the price of £130 or £100 on sale sounds pretty good, and this price just gets even better as you start to learn a few more of this phone's superpowers. In the box, you really don't get much. You get the phone itself, a SIM eject tool, all of the paperwork, and a USB-C cable. That's literally it. And it really surprised me to see that, because with these lower end devices, particularly from companies like Honor and Poco, you normally see a charging brick and sometimes even a case. To have those things omitted here felt a little odd, but if it gets to that lower price point, I'm happy. When you tour the device, you can see that one of the major selling points of this phone, and that is its 6.8-inch widescreen display. Trust me when I say this phone is big and tall. Seriously, it dwarfs even the iPhone 15 and 16 Pro Maxes. This slightly wider aspect ratio actually plays into this phone's favour, especially when you're viewing things on Netflix and YouTube that are built to be cinematic. You're actually losing that weird letterboxing that you'd normally get from other styles of smartphone. And it just gives you a better overall experience when it comes to viewing that style of content. Sadly though, the screen does top out at 720p. That's a little disappointing, especially even at this price point. I would expect a full 1080p display here. Saying that though, a lot of the time this screen looks great. Its colour reproduction is nice, its max brightness under normal conditions is 400 nits, but it can boost to up to 600. So this phone can in theory be used outside, fine, but it definitely isn't going to be winning any awards for its brightness. One of my major disappointments with this screen though is its bezels, in particular its chin. Seriously, this thing's bezels are straight out of 2016, and I really do wish that it stayed there. It features the pretty standard teardrop design camera. It's got 13 megapixels and we'll come on to how it looks a little bit later. The body of the phone is a pretty much all plastic affair. That does help to keep the weight down generally. This thing weighs in at around 204 grams. Especially for its size, that's actually surprisingly light. On the left-hand side of the device, you've got the dual SIM and microSD card slot. It's nice to see a dual SIM option here, especially on the lower end. Along the top of the device, you get a 3.5mm headphone jack and one of those microphones. I like having the 3.5mm jack here. It's very standard on these lower end devices, but I'm glad it's something that's been kept because a lot of people who are buying this style of device probably don't have Bluetooth headphones, so having it there is actually really helpful. On the right hand side, you have the volume rocker and the power button, which is also a fingerprint sensor. This fingerprint sensor is fast enough, and honestly I have no real complaints about it. Along the bottom of the device is where you see the USB-C port and the singular speaker. Of course you've got the main earpiece, but this doesn't act as a loudspeaker, so any audio you do here is only going to come out of the bottom of the phone. That being said, my right ear very much enjoyed the sound that this phone produced. It was clear and crisp, and actually went very well with the screen when watching content on Netflix. The only real downside is there was a lack of bass, but that's pretty standard on this style of device. The back of this phone is where it really comes into its own in terms of design. It's actually pretty unique. I've got the black one here, and you can see it sparkle and shimmer and shine in the light. The two-tone matte and gloss design is also really nice to see. If black isn't your colour, they also have two other colourways, which actually produce this really nice marbled effect. I think the marble effect design is more effective than the black shimmer that we've got here. But honestly, any of these phones will look pretty unique. The camera bump here takes up most, if not all, of the space of the top half of this phone. And quite honestly, it really didn't need to. Upon first glance, you would expect to see 4 cameras here because you can sort of see 4 cutouts, but that really isn't the case. The main lens here is a 50 megapixel camera. You also have the flash along the top, as well as a little sticker on the bottom telling you that it's a 50 megapixel camera. I don't like the way they made this phone look like it has more cameras than it actually does. It felt a little deceiving and I just didn't like it. That being said though, that single camera is perfectly serviceable. It produced nice colours and there wasn't a ton of over sharpening or AI going on. There was some sharpening still happening here and it led to some images that didn't quite look right. They're obviously not going to win any awards when it comes to things like the Google Pixel and the iPhone. You're not going to get that sort of quality of photo and video from it, but for its price point, I was really impressed by the photos here. Videos were the same sort of thing. They looked fine, were fairly colour accurate, but there's absolutely no image stabilisation happening here. So whenever you do take any video, it's a bit of a blurry mess, especially if you're walking and talking like I was here. Before we move on to talking about the software though, I do just want to say that if this is the first time that you're seeing my face on your screen, then 1, lucky you, and 2, go down there, hit that subscribe button, smash that notification bell, so you get notified every time I upload. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the software that comes on this phone. Being one of Xiaomi's subsidiaries, it actually comes with HyperOS 1. This isn't HyperOS 2, which is the latest OS that they've released. I don't expect this phone to get it either. HyperOS is not my favourite Android skin, but it's also not my least favourite. It's sort of somewhere in the middle and it's perfectly serviceable. Unfortunately, you do get a lot of bloatware when you first start up the device, both from Xiaomi and other third parties. Sure, it's pretty easy to remove it, but I just wish it wasn't here in the first place. One thing I am glad that they've removed is adverts. They used to do this thing where you just get random adverts while you were using the phone. That's not really the case anymore, and I'm really glad to see that that trend has died out. You get 2 promised software updates. Unfortunately, one of those was from Android 14 to 15. I feel like out of the box, this thing should have come with Android 15 anyway. So realistically, you're only getting 1 more update, or major one, and then all of those security patches as well. With that G81 processor and 6GB of RAM, performance could chug at times, especially with that higher refresh rate display. This display is 120Hz and it really does help with content and particularly games. Whether you're scrolling social media or watching videos on Netflix and YouTube, this phone runs fairly well. It could even play quite a few games, including Genshin Impact and Call of Duty Mobile, which I was pretty impressed by. Sure, these only really run on the lower end settings. They're not going to run great or even at all on the medium to high settings, but quite honestly, again, for that price point, you should not expect that. I was just surprised it ran them at all. That 120Hz display as well also means that you get the competitive edge on certain games like Call of Duty Mobile, where every frame counts. Watching videos and other multimedia, I really didn't see an issue at all in terms of performance, and I was pretty impressed. That's probably because of that 720p display. It really isn't pushing that many pixels, but it was an enjoyable experience. I took this thing on holiday with me recently and started watching Vikings on Netflix, and I was pleasantly surprised by how good of an experience it was to watch on that phone. I actually chose to watch it on this over my iPhone purely because of that nice widescreen display. In terms of battery, we've got a 5160 mAh battery. That actually got me enough battery life for around 2 days of quite heavy use. It's a big battery and it means that you get a lot of usage out of it. And that's good too, because you don't want to charge this thing too often. Realistically, it can only charge at 38 watts and it goes from 0 to 100% in around 2 hours. That is pretty slow, especially for a smartphone in 2025. In conclusion then, I think this phone is actually at a perfect price point for people looking for their first phone or phones for friends and family who aren't going to do heavy workloads and don't really care about cameras and videography. It's a great multimedia device for consuming social media and the occasional Netflix and even gaming. Sure, if you want the best of the best performance, you're not going to get it here, but you shouldn't expect to for that super low price. So why don't you guys let me know what you think of the Poco C75 in the comments section down below. And of course, while you're down there, why don't you get subscribed, share this with your friends and family, and do all of that good stuff, because it genuinely does mean the world to me and it helps me out a ton. If you want to purchase one of these, there will be an Amazon link in the description down below. That is an affiliate link, which means that I get a small kickback whenever you purchase. Anyway, guys, my name's been Robert. This has been Bite Size Clue, and I will catch you in the next one. Adios.